Psalm 90. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, wherever you had formed the earth and the world from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You return man to dust and say, Return, O children of man, for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. For we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands. Establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. So there's a number of things to see in this psalm. It's a psalm that kind of explains for us, lays out for us a vision of wisdom, and where wisdom's to be found, and how to live in the light of that wisdom. But it begins with a vision of God, a God who is unchanging, a God who's a dwelling place for generations, a God who has been, who ever will be, from everlasting to everlasting. Here's God. So here's a vision of God as big and as massive and as glorious, as a God who has existed for all time, and who isn't changing. He's not tossed about. And then set right alongside that, right beside that, is the transience of man, the shortness of our life, how we return to dusk. Here's the God who establishes the mountains, and has been from everlasting to everlasting. And set right next to it by the psalmist is man who doesn't establish the mountains. In fact, we return to dust, and whose life is like grass, who in the morning the grass is thriving, and by the end of the day the grass is dead. And so the first thing this psalm kind of sets before us, reminds us of, at the heart of wisdom, is just a picture of the shortness of our life, a picture of the reality of death, and how death presses in upon us, and also about just the smallness of mankind. That you and I are little. We are tiny. Within the scope of who God is and what God is doing over the history of mankind and the history of the world, like our lives are but a breath. They're almost like nothing. And this should lead us, what kind of wisdom does this lead us to? It should lead us to a kind of a refusal to take ourselves too seriously. We should treat the truth with blood earnestness. We should treat the glory and the majesty of God with blood earnestness. But me, my own life, no, it's a small thing. It's but a breath in the scope of who God is and what God's doing. The second thing that the psalmist links together for us is the nature of God's judgment and his wrath, and the reality of death. And so the fact that death is present, that it's constantly hanging over us, our days are numbered. That from the moment you're born, death comes racing towards you. It should be for us a constant reminder of the wrath of God and the judgment of God, that it's coming, that it's real. And this should shape us. It should kind of shape our understanding of the world, such that, as it says here, it should give us a heart of wisdom. In other words, recognizing and knowing that God's wrath is real and it's coming. And death, as it surrounds us, death as it races towards us, should be a reminder of the fact that we will stand before God and be judged, that his wrath is real and it's coming towards us and it surrounds us. It even marks the very trouble of our lives. The Proverbs teach us that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. And where does the fear of God begin? But seeing and beholding the fact That our God is creator, he's everlasting to everlasting, and he is a judge, and his wrath is terrible, and it's coming. And so how does the psalmist then decide to live? How does he ask God to help him live? At verse 12, so teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. That we see the span of our days and begin to reorient our understanding of the importance of our own lives, the direction of our own lives, where we stand before God, and how we should reflect the commands of God and the Word of God, by thinking about the fact that our lives are short and death is real. In other words, number your days and then live in the light of all that teaches us. And then, for all of those days, may we be satisfied by the steadfast love of God. I mean, here's a remarkable thing. It's not because our lives are vastly and deeply important that we can then measure our worth before God. It's not because death isn't coming for us that we can measure our worth before God. No, it's because of the free covenant love of God poured out on us. And what the psalmist asks for here, the kind of life that will be marked by wisdom, is a life that finds not just a knowledge of the steadfast covenant love of God, but here, look at this. He says, satisfy us in the morning. Here's an experience, a daily experience of the covenant love of God for his people. The psalmist says wisdom, understanding all of these things about the universe, about the shortness of our lives, about the realities of God's judgment, should lead us to fear God and thereby live wisely, and should seek us to be satisfied, to have real daily experiences of the covenant love of God given to us in Jesus and imparted to us by the word of the Spirit. And then the last kind of cry is that God would establish the work of our hands. So in light of the fear of God, in light of the reality of death, in light of a daily, ongoing kind of communion with God, in light of his steadfast love for us, we then work. We work with our hands, we build things, we work hard with our hands, trusting in his steadfast love and pleading with him that the work we do wouldn't be in vain. Which is, of course, what Paul promises is given to those who belong to Jesus in light of the resurrection of Jesus. That God is building a new world, flooding it with truth and beauty and goodness, remaking everything. And in ways, some ways that we don't even understand, and other ways that we do. God's taking the work done in faith, the work done in trust, and he's establishing it that none of our good works would be in vain.